Judge Karen waltzed into the White House, barged into the Oval Office, propped her feet up on the resolute desk, and said, "Hey, I'm in charge around here." That's basically what happened.
Narrator, that is not, in fact, what happened. We got to check in with MAGA star and YouTuber and Daily Wire host Matt Walsh, who is coming kind of unhinged. He's getting very radical, and he's calling on President Trump to do something that, if the president took his advice, would destroy our constitutional order as we know it. Our system of checks and balances would be ripped up in flames, and all over a news story where Matt doesn't really seem to know what he's talking about. The context here is that President Trump has tried to deploy National Guard, which is a branch of the U.S. military, although it's a little different from the other branches, to Portland, Oregon, to deal with what he says is a city that's just totally out of control, and there's been these demonstrations and riots and assaults on federal officers, and there's a whole showdown going on. However, federal law is very limited as to when you are allowed to use the military domestically. And so this was immediately challenged in court, and a U.S. district court judge, a federal judge, ruled that it was illegal to deploy the National Guard in the way that President Trump has. He's now appealing the decision, which is what normal people do when they don't like a court decision. But before we get into Matt Walsh's kind of crazy take on all this, here's the CNN reporting about the judge's initial decision that will provide some more context.
What this decision is doing is basically pressing pause on the deployment of the National Guard to Oregon. The question that the judge, Karen Immergut, a Trump appointee, I should add, had to answer was this an overreach by the federal government to federalize the National Guard? In the complaint, both the state of Oregon and the city of Portland had called this deployment unlawful and unwarranted, but there were three basic pillars that her decision was based on. One of them is Section 12406 of the U.S. Code. It says basically that the president exceeded his authority here and that he did not prove that he was, quote, unable with regular forces to execute the laws there. A second one is the concept of rebellion. The standard for rebellion here was not met. Now, what's notable here is when the judge got into talking about the history of the United States and military power, she said, quote, this country has a long-standing and foundational tradition of resistance to government overreach, especially in the form of military intrusion into civil affairs. She says the U.S. is a nation of constitutional law, not martial law.
Now, Matt Walsh responded to this ruling by posting this on X. We have long reached the point where Trump needs to openly defy these judges. Some random federal judge has no authority to decide how and if troops are deployed. She is not the commander-in-chief. Ignore her and deploy them. It's time for a showdown with these activist judges. This is a really remarkable take, calling for a very drastic escalation, and it leaves out quite a bit of crucial information about this judge, namely that she is not a random judge. She is the federal court judge for the district that includes Portland, Oregon, and that she was appointed by Trump, and before that worked under Bush, and is actually a Republican-appointed judge who leans more conservative in her jurisprudence, but still ruled against the Trump administration here. So not some lived-out activist woke judge. All of that left out from Matt's tweet, and then he covered this on his show, doubled down on all of this, and went through what I think was some pretty misleading and radical coverage of this showdown. Let's take a look, though, and you can decide for yourself.
This random judge, this random woman in a robe has decided that actually she's the commander-in-chief. Trump thought he was the commander-in-chief. That was his mistake. He thought he was the one elected to be the one who decides how and if and when and where troops are deployed. But no. Turns out it was this chick, Judge Karen. She's in charge. Judge Karen waltzed into the White House, barged into the Oval Office, propped her feet up on the resolute desk, and said, "Hey, I'm in charge around here." That's basically what happened.
Narrator, that is not, in fact, what happened. It is hilarious to me how this judge's name happens to be Karen, and he's just running with that. Like, that's an argument in and of itself. But no, guys, the reason that Judge Immergut was involved in this case is because she's the U.S. District Court for the District of Oregon, appointed by President Trump in 2019, by the way, and confirmed by the Senate. and that federal district courts have jurisdiction over cases that arise within their geographic boundaries. So that is why, because the challenge was made to the action that occurred here, and so that is why it's her case. She's not some random judge, like he makes it sound, who just decided to poke her neck in and say, what about what I think? And then it is not, oh, well, she's trying to be the commander in chief. No, she's stepping in to issue a ruling on relevant federal laws that limit when the president is allowed to deploy the military domestically. And that is literally the job of federal judges, is to interpret and uphold federal laws. Now, and just, she's like, oh, the president, he really seems to think the president can just do whatever he wants with the military and there's no judicial recourse whatsoever. That's legit. That's just not true. So actually, multiple Supreme Court cases affirm the judicial branch's right to rule that a military decision or enactment by the president is unlawful. And all of this comes back, again, to interpreting federal law, as we'll get into. But let's listen to more of Matt.
Basically what happened. And now Trump has to decide how to respond. And he has basically two options. I mean, not basically. He has only two options. He can bow down before Judge Karen, who is now the president and the queen of America, that she's appointed herself as such. And he can say, yes, ma'am. Yes, Madam President. Whatever you say, my queen. Can I get you a Diet Coke, perhaps? What else do you require, my lady? He can do that, or he can reassert his authority. He can say, hey, get the hell out of here. Who the hell are you? Get out of here. I'm the president, not you. I don't care what you think. Those are the options. Subservience or the reassertion of his own power. Those are the only options.
Those aren't the only options, actually. Matt left out a glaring one, which would be this thing. It's called an appeal. It's like when you disagree with a court decision, you can appeal it to a higher court. I don't know if he knows that that's a thing. I know that he does, but he's engaging in this demagogic rhetoric where he's presenting either subservience to one federal judge or just blowing up the whole system and saying, I no longer recognize the legitimacy of courts. I'm a president. I can do whatever I want. And I just no longer, we might as well just shut down the federal courts at that point, by the way, because then they no longer have any sort of ability to check the government, which is what they're supposed to do, is be part of a system of checks and balances. Well, Matt wants to just blow that up by having the president go Rambo and say, I don't abide by any judges, which is incredibly authoritarian. You're therefore asking for an authoritarian leader who doesn't respect the rule of law, the limits on their power. No, the normal option is to appeal the decision you don't like, abide by it in the interim, and appeal it. And in fact, it's almost like there's a 6-3 conservative majority on the Supreme Court. So if this is really such an egregious, terrible decision, and I actually don't think it is, but, and Matt, at no point in his monologue about this, does he actually engage with any of the judge's reasoning or explain why it's wrong, but say that it is wrong. Well, then you'd think that a 6-3 conservative majority, including 3 Trump appointees, would then overturn it after the appeals court level. Maybe it gets overturned there, but even if it doesn't, then you can appeal it to the Supreme Court. And so you literally control. This is so wild to me because it's not even as if this is a case where you have like a liberal activist judge blocking stuff and then no hope to appeal it because the Democrats control the Supreme Court or something like that. None of that is the case here. Even then, it would still be very dangerous and escalatory to start defying court rulings, and I wouldn't support it. But at least then there'd be like some understandable reason to do that. Here, it's literally just impatience. He's just having a temper tantrum, doesn't want to wait, and is like, yeah, okay, then we will just do whatever we want instead. It's crazy. It's genuinely crazy and radical. We'll just burn down the whole system of checks and balances because if Trump can just ignore court orders, the next Democratic president can. And then we just pretty soon don't have checks and balances, don't have a rule of law. But go off, King. Have your little, do your big one and your little monologue. He's very charismatic, but he's a demagogue. He really is.
Those are the only options. We have long reached the point. I mean, long reached it, where Trump has no good choice. Because like I said, those are the two. And he has no good choice but to openly defy these activist judges. There's no third way now, right?
I think Matt might not know that this is a Trump-appointed judge, because I'm showing you guys a couple-minute clip, but I did watch the whole video. I always do. He never mentions that this woman was appointed by Trump. I don't think maybe I missed it. I don't think he mentions it. And he keeps calling her an activist judge. Now, this is like a Federalist Society judge. This is not a liberal activist judge. He's totally misleading his viewers and listeners. But go off.
Hey, now, right? And by that I don't mean, issuing posts on Truth Social. I don't even mean challenging this in a court.
Oh, so now he does admit there's more than just the two options, that you can appeal a decision. Wow. Okay. 2 seconds ago, you were saying there's literally only two options.
I mean, flipping her the bird and ignoring her, just doing it anyway. Saying, oh, you don't think I should deploy the troops into, oh, okay, well, I just did. What now? Oh, you don't think I should? Well, I did. It's happening. It's happening, lady. What are you going to do about it? Huh? What are you going to do about it? Trump has every constitutional right to deploy the National Guard to Portland. Not only the right, but the responsibility, I would say.
So here's the interesting thing. The reason that this judge ruled it was illegal and unconstitutional for Trump to do this, there were a few reasons. But essentially, and I'll try to summarize this here for you, there are federal laws that specify when you can intervene in local matters with the military or the National Guard. And the judge examined the different conditions for when that's allowed and said they're not met here. So just a couple points. The main relevant law here is the Posse Comitatus Act of 1878. This is law passed by Congress. Again, not just a judge deciding to get involved. She's enforcing and interpreting federal laws about this, which limits the president's ability to use military forces domestically without one of two things: specific congressional approval, which Trump has not received for this, or a clear rebellion, which she looked at the legal definition of what a rebellion is and did not find that the conditions for that were met. Now, there's also the Insurrection Act of 1807, which could allow for troops to be deployed in the kind of manner that President Trump is doing, but that requires a formal declaration of an insurrection, which he has not issued. So that's not relevant in this case either. Anyway, then there's the 10th Amendment issue, which rules the powers are left to the states. All of this stuff is addressed in her ruling. And again, this is not a liberal activist judge. This is a Trump-appointed federal judge. And she says this is not, in fact, justified or legal. And so that she rules that it is illegal for Trump to deploy the military like this. And it's been repeatedly affirmed by the Supreme Court that you can, in fact, have judicial rulings on military actions because they're bound by federal law. What he seems to be suggesting is that the president is just a Rambo and can do whatever he wants when it comes to the military. I think that's probably actually bad and dangerous. And I imagine Matt would too, if it was not his guy. And if you have these double standards, you don't have any at all. I mean, if you can just go rogue and ignore federal court judges, then so many of the conservative wins in court against the Biden administration would have been meaningless. When they took down the vaccine mandate, when they got so many of his student loan programs blocked, all of that, the Biden administration eventually abided by all those court decisions because that is the norm in American society. And if you want to change that, you can't only change it for your side. I don't know. I just think it's playing a very dangerous game here.
Portland is a war zone. It's total chaos. It's in a state of open insurrection. ICE agents are being attacked. Portland is trying to subvert the authority of the federal government, defy the laws of the land. Obviously an occasion for the National Guard. Judge Karen disagrees. Well, her random opinion doesn't matter.
Again, it is not a random opinion, and he didn't engage with any of the actual federal laws rationale. He omitted key facts. He's saying Portland is an open insurrection. Trump hasn't declared an insurrection there, so that isn't relevant and obviously isn't true, or he would have. And then she also examined the claims about the crime and how out of control the violent protests and disruptions to federal officers are. She found that they did not meet the threshold of some of the claims that the administration was making. I don't know. I'm not an expert in the Posse Comitatus Act, right? I'm not an expert in any of these things. I'm not a lawyer at all. So maybe the Trump administration is right and they'll appeal this ruling and they will win. They've appealed to other rulings limiting their ability to deploy the National Guard, and won. But that's the correct path here, not the kind of authoritarian, crazy, norm-breaking, society-destroying, frankly, escalation and overreach that Matt is advocating here. And I find it bizarre to be, though I guess it makes sense when you think of Matt as primarily an entertainer and primarily somebody who thinks and speaks in terms of emotion and what he can rile people up as, and not as somebody who kind of analyzes facts and news. That makes more sense. But it's really dangerous what he's advocating for. And he has millions of people that listen to him. So to have someone on the mainstream right in American politics espousing such nakedly authoritarian escalations is really disturbing to me. But what do you guys think? Let me know what you think in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Hit the like button, yada, yada, yada. And that'll be it for today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. And we will talk again real soon.